The mansion on Crestwood Hill was known for its beauty, but also for the whispers that circled it like cold wind. Behind the tall iron gates stood a billion-dollar home that should have echoed with laughter, yet inside it was quiet, too quiet. The only sound that often broke the silence was the cry of a child, a little boy named Ethan. He was the son of Robert Hensley, a billionaire businessman whose empire stretched from New York to Los Angeles. Robert had everything a man could dream of: power, luxury, respect, and yet he was a man broken by loss. His wife, Clara, had died giving birth to Ethan, and ever since that day, Robert's heart had been frozen in grief. The mansion became a place of cold schedules, robotic servants, and walls that seemed to breathe loneliness. Ethan was 4 years old now, but there was something different about him. Something no doctor could fully explain. He barely spoke, and when he did, his words came out in fragments, like small pieces of broken glass. Every nanny who had ever come into that house had left in tears or with scratches across their arms. Ethan didn't like to be touched. He didn't want to be near anyone. He screamed at voices, threw toys across rooms, and once even bit a woman who tried to hug him. Robert had hired the best therapists, psychologists, and behavioral experts, but no one lasted more than a week. The boy was beautiful, angelic, even with golden curls and deep blue eyes, but he had the rage of a storm trapped in a child's body. The staff whispered about him behind closed doors. Some said he was cursed. Others said he simply missed his mother. Robert ignored all of it. He was tired, buried in work, and couldn't face the truth that his own son might be suffering because of his absence. He had promised himself that he'd do whatever it took to help Ethan, no matter the cost. But when the fifth nanny quit, slamming the front door in tears, he finally felt the weight of despair. That night he sat in the dark nursery, watching his son sleep, and wondered if God was punishing him for something he had done in another life. The next morning, the agency sent someone new. Her name was Amara Jones, a woman with deep brown skin and eyes that carried both strength and sorrow. She wasn't like the others. She didn't wear designer clothes or smell of expensive perfume. She wore a simple blue uniform, her hair pulled into a bun, and her smile, gentle but steady, gave off warmth that the house hadn't felt in years. Robert didn't know what to think of her when she entered his office. "You've read the file?" he asked, his tone distant. "The boy is difficult." Amara nodded quietly. "Children act out when their hearts are hurt, sir," she said softly. "It's not the boy's fault. It's his pain speaking." Her words startled him. No one had ever spoken like that about Ethan. Most nannies had looked terrified before even meeting the child. But there was something in Amara's voice, a calmness that felt almost sacred. Robert sighed and handed her a folder. "You'll start today. If you can last a week, I'll double your pay." She smiled gently. "I'm not here for the money, Mr. Hensley. I'm here for the boy." When she entered the nursery, the air felt heavy with tension. Toys were scattered everywhere, the curtains drawn tight, and little Ethan sat in a corner clutching a small stuffed bear, his blue eyes cold and wary. Amara didn't move toward him. She simply knelt a few feet away and began picking up the toys, humming softly to herself, a low, soothing melody from her childhood. Ethan watched her like a tiny predator watching something unfamiliar. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He just stared. After a few minutes, she said quietly, "That's a nice bear you've got there." Ethan said nothing. His lips trembled slightly, but his eyes stayed fixed on her. "You know," she continued, her tone light, "my little brother had one just like it. He called him Captain Braveheart. What's yours called?" Still silence, but his fingers tightened on the bear's paw. She smiled faintly. "That's okay. You don't have to tell me yet. I'll wait." For the first time in months, the mansion didn't echo with screams. Robert stood outside the nursery door, listening in disbelief. The other nannies had been attacked within minutes of entering that room. Yet here was Amara, calm, quiet, and patient. She didn't push, didn't force, didn't demand. She just existed in the same space as Ethan, letting him breathe. When lunchtime came, she placed a small plate of food near him and didn't insist he eat. Instead, she sat by the window, eating her own meal slowly. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him glance toward her, then at the food. He didn't eat, but he didn't throw the plate either, and that for Amara was progress. That night, when Robert passed by the nursery again, he found Ethan asleep on the floor, the bear in his arms, and Amara sitting beside him, her back against the wall, quietly reading a children's book under the dim light. For a brief moment, something shifted inside him, a flicker of warmth he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, when Amara returned, something incredible happened. Ethan saw her at the door and didn't scream. His eyes lit up for a second, and then just faintly he smiled. The first smile anyone had seen from him in nearly 2 years. Robert stood frozen in the hallway, his heart pounding. He couldn't believe it. It was then that he realized maybe this woman, this quiet, humble maid with the voice of calm and eyes full of compassion, might be the only person who could reach the broken pieces of his son's heart. But what Robert didn't know was that Amara carried her own secret, a pain buried deep in her past, one that would soon entwine with his family's fate in ways none of them could imagine. For days, the mansion seemed to breathe again. It wasn't loud or cheerful, but something subtle had changed, like the air had grown softer, less heavy. The staff began whispering that the boy had finally smiled. No one believed it until they saw Ethan walking quietly beside the new maid, his small hand clutching her skirt as if it were a lifeline. The same boy who had thrown toys, screamed at every voice, and locked himself away was now following Amara around the halls. It was a fragile miracle, but it was real. Robert Hensley watched them from his office window, unsure of what to feel. He had seen miracles before, in the boardroom, in the stock market, but this one felt different. It wasn't made of logic or numbers. It was something invisible, something pure. He couldn't understand how this woman, a stranger with no degrees or credentials, had managed to do what doctors and specialists had failed to do for years. He decided to observe her quietly before making any assumptions. Amara didn't do anything extraordinary. She spoke to Ethan like he was just a child, not a problem to be solved. She never raised her voice, never tried to control him. She read to him in the mornings, sang soft songs in the afternoons, and sat with him in silence when he refused to speak. Sometimes, she'd hum a tune that sounded like something old, African spiritual music maybe, and the rhythm would calm him instantly. There was a gentle magic in her presence that filled the spaces where pain had once lived. But healing wasn't a straight path. One rainy afternoon, as thunder rolled outside, Ethan suddenly began screaming in the nursery. Amara rushed in to find him curled up under the bed, shaking violently. He was covering his ears, whispering no, 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 over and over again. She didn't speak. She knelt beside him and began to hum softly, the same melody she'd used before. Slowly, his sobs quieted. His trembling hands reached toward her, and for the first time, he allowed her to touch him. She placed her palm gently on his head, whispering, "You're safe, baby. You're safe now." Robert saw the whole thing through the half-open door. He couldn't move. It was like watching a wound finally begin to close, but something about Amara's words struck him deeply, the way she said, "safe now," as if she knew what it felt like not to be. That night, Robert asked the head butler about her. "Who exactly is she?" he demanded, trying to keep his tone neutral. The butler hesitated. "Sir, Miss Jones's file is incomplete. The agency had very little information. She came highly recommended by a social worker in Atlanta, but her background is private. She requested not to disclose personal details." Robert frowned. Private. That didn't sit well with him. He was a man who believed in knowing everything about the people around him. Secrets had no place in his world. But before he could ask further, he heard a soft laugh echo from the hallway, Ethan's laugh. For a moment, his heart melted again. Maybe, just maybe, it didn't matter where Amara came from. What mattered was what she was doing now. Later that evening, Amara found him standing in the nursery doorway, watching her as she helped Ethan arrange his toys. "He's laughing," Robert said quietly, almost as if he couldn't believe it. "He hasn't laughed since." He stopped mid-sentence. The memory of Clara's death hung between them like a ghost. Amara looked at him kindly. "Grief can take away sound, Mr. Hensley. Sometimes children stop laughing because the house around them stops laughing first." He stared at her for a moment, his throat tightening. You talk like someone who's known loss. She paused. We all carry our shadows, sir. Some just hide them better. That night, when she returned to her small servant's room on the east side of the mansion, Amara sat by the window and opened a worn locket. Inside was a photo, a little girl with the same deep brown eyes as hers. She traced the image with her finger, whispering, I hope you're somewhere safe, my love. Her eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them away quickly. She couldn't afford to let the past resurface. Not here. Not now. Meanwhile, Ethan was changing in ways no one expected. He began talking again, short sentences at first. Book, please. Amara, stay. Don't go. His voice was soft and shaky, but it was there. One morning, as she prepared his breakfast, he pointed to a photo of his late mother that hung on the kitchen wall. Mama, he whispered. Amara froze. She turned to him gently. She's very beautiful, isn't she? Ethan nodded. Then, after a long pause, he said something no one had ever heard from him before. Mama, in heaven? Amara's throat tightened. Yes, sweetheart. She's in heaven. Ethan looked up at her with eyes full of innocence. And you? She blinked, surprised. What about me? He asked softly. You from heaven, too? Tears filled her eyes. She smiled and shook her head. No, baby. I'm just from somewhere very far away. Robert overheard that from the hallway. His chest ached. It was strange hearing his son speak words that felt like prayers. He had been so focused on work and wealth that he had forgotten what simple miracles looked like. And this woman, this maid, had brought one into his home. But with every step toward healing, shadows began to stir. One evening, Robert received a call from his security chief. Sir, you might want to see this, the man said. We did a routine background check. Amara Jones's file doesn't exist before 5 years ago. No birth records, no school, no tax data. It's like she just appeared out of nowhere. Robert's face went pale. He looked out the window, where Amara was sitting with Ethan by the garden fountain, both laughing softly as the sunset painted their faces gold. Keep this between us for now, he said, and don't tell her anything. As the days passed, his suspicion and admiration for her grew in equal measure. He couldn't decide whether to trust her or fear her. But one thing was certain, she had become the heartbeat of the house. Late one night, thunder roared again. Robert couldn't sleep. He walked to the nursery and saw Ethan sleeping peacefully, his small hand resting in Amara's. She had fallen asleep sitting beside him, her head against the crib, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a night light. For the first time, Robert whispered, "Thank you," though she couldn't hear it. But as lightning flashed through the window, something glimmered on her wrist, a small scar shaped like a cross. He frowned. It looked old, burned into the skin, as if it held a story too painful to tell. And in that quiet, storm-lit moment, Robert knew Amara Jones was no ordinary woman. She had come into his home for a reason, and that reason was just beginning to unfold. The days that followed were filled with small miracles. Ethan began to talk more, laugh louder, and even draw colorful pictures in a sketchbook. He would often tug on Amara's hand, leading her through the mansion as if showing her his world, a world that had been locked away for years. The boy who once attacked every nanny now clung to her as if afraid she might disappear. The staff adored her. Even the cold marble halls seemed warmer when her voice echoed through them. The mansion had finally come alive, but inside Amara's heart, the warmth was mixed with fear. Every time Ethan laughed, she felt joy but also pain. He reminded her too much of someone she had lost. Some nights, when the house was asleep, she would stand by the window, tears sliding silently down her face. The memory of her own little girl, Lila, haunted her dreams. Lila had been only 3 when Amara lost her, a car accident that had torn her world apart. Her husband had been driving drunk, and when the crash happened, only he survived. That night, Amara lost not only her child but her will to live. She had left her city, her name, and her past behind, changing everything to escape the pain. The scar on her wrist was a reminder of the day she almost ended her own life. until she decided to dedicate it to helping children who had lost what she had. Ethan had become that purpose, her reason to keep breathing. One morning, while she was teaching Ethan to read in the nursery, Robert entered quietly. He stood by the door watching them. The sunlight streamed through the window, catching Amara's face in a soft glow. Ethan was pointing at the word love in his picture book, sounding it out slowly. Lou, love. Amara smiled. That's perfect, baby. Robert couldn't help but smile too. It was the first time he had heard his son speak that word. After the lesson, Robert called Amara to his office. She walked in nervously, thinking she might have done something wrong. He gestured toward the chair. Please sit. His tone was calm but serious. Amara, he began, I've seen what you've done for my son. I can't express how grateful I am. You've brought light back into his life, into this house. Thank you, sir, she said softly. But he continued, leaning forward, I need to understand who you are. You have no background record before 2020. No address, no family, nothing. That doesn't happen by accident. Her body stiffened. You've been checking on me? I check on everyone who comes near my son, he replied gently. You must understand that. Amara looked down at her hands. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she whispered, You're right, Mr. Hensley. My past isn't clean. I lost someone once. My little girl. I wasn't strong enough to face that pain. So I ran. I changed my name and started over. That's all. Her voice trembled. I'm not a danger to your son. I would die before hurting him. Robert felt a pang of guilt. Her voice was too honest to be false. I'm sorry, he said softly. It's just after Clara died, I've lived in fear of losing Ethan too. You understand that, don't you? Amara nodded, eyes glistening. I understand it better than you think. From that day forward, something unspoken grew between them. It wasn't romance, not yet, but a deep, aching understanding, the bond of two souls who had both been shattered by loss. They began to talk more about Ethan, about grief, about forgiveness, and in those quiet moments, Robert began to feel something he thought had died with his wife, peace. One afternoon, while Amara was outside helping Ethan chase butterflies in the garden, Robert's sister, Victoria, arrived. She was a tall, elegant woman with sharp eyes and sharper opinions. Robert, she said as she entered his office, I just heard from one of your staff that you've hired some maid to raise your son. She's more than that, he replied calmly. More than that. Victoria laughed coldly. She's a maid, Robert, a stranger with no history. Do you realize how dangerous that is? What will people think if they find out the billionaire Robert Hensley lets some mysterious woman care for his child? Robert's patience snapped. I don't care what people think. She's helping Ethan in ways no one else could. Victoria frowned. I did some digging. That woman doesn't exist before a few years ago. That's not normal. If you won't protect your son, I will. That evening, Victoria secretly met with the family lawyer. I want you to find out everything about Amara Jones, she ordered. Every record, every secret. Meanwhile, Amara was unaware of the storm building behind her. She was too busy teaching Ethan how to hold a crayon properly, how to say please and thank you, how to look at the world without fear. Each small step made her feel closer to redemption. That night, after Ethan went to bed, she sat alone in the garden, her hands folded in prayer. Lord, she whispered, don't let my past destroy this child's future. Unbeknownst to her, Robert was watching from the balcony above. He saw her lips moving in silent prayer and felt something stir inside him. Admiration, maybe even affection. He wondered how a woman who had suffered so much could still radiate such gentleness. But peace never lasts long in a house built on secrets. The next morning, Victoria stormed in with papers in hand. Robert, you need to see this, she said, slamming the file onto his desk. His heart sank as he opened it. Inside were police records from Georgia, a case file for Amara Coleman, charged with reckless endangerment 5 years ago. The report said she had left her child in a car on a hot day while she was working a double shift. The child had died before help arrived. Robert's hands trembled. This can't be right. Victoria's voice was cold. It's all there. She changed her name from Coleman to Jones afterward. She disappeared and reappeared under a new identity. She's been hiding from this ever since. He felt sick. Images of Amara and Ethan laughing filled his mind. Could this woman, the one who had saved his son's soul, really be the same one responsible for her own child's death? When Amara came into the study later that day, she saw the file on the table. Her face went pale. Robert looked up at her, pain and confusion in his eyes. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Please, let me explain." "I need the truth, Amara," he said, his voice shaking. "All of it." She took a deep breath, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, it's true. I was that woman. I was young, poor, and working 3 jobs. I left my daughter in the car for just 20 minutes. I thought she'd be fine. But when I came back, her voice broke. She was gone. I lost everything that day. My child, my home, my name, my soul. I've been trying to atone ever since." Robert's heart shattered. He wanted to be angry, but when he looked at her, truly looked, all he saw was pain and regret. Before he could speak, Ethan appeared at the door, rubbing his sleepy eyes. "Amara," he whispered, "don't cry." He ran to her and hugged her tightly. In that moment, Robert saw something he couldn't explain, forgiveness in its purest form. The child who had hated every touch was now holding the woman everyone doubted. And deep down, Robert realized something powerful. Perhaps people who have known the deepest pain are the only ones who can truly heal others. But the world outside would not forgive as easily as a child. And soon, the past Amara thought she had buried would come crashing back, threatening to destroy the fragile happiness she had found. The next morning, the mansion was no longer the quiet sanctuary it had become. The atmosphere felt tense, like the air before a storm. Whispers traveled through the halls. The staff had heard fragments of what happened. Victoria's voice had carried down the marble corridors the night before, loud enough for everyone to catch words like child, death, and criminal record. The story spread like wildfire. The same people who had once smiled at Amara now avoided her gaze. When she entered a room, conversation stopped. Even Ethan could sense the change. Robert stayed locked in his office for hours, staring at the case file. Every word felt like a knife. He wanted to believe her, but the report was so cold and final. Her name, the charges, the photographs. Yet something inside him refused to accept that the woman who had transformed his son could be a monster. He kept hearing Ethan's laughter in his mind, that innocent, joyful sound that Amara had brought back to life. Could someone evil give life back to a child's heart? Meanwhile, Amara sat alone in the servants' quarters, trembling. She had known this day might come, but not like this, not when things were finally healing. The memories came back in fragments. The heat of the Georgia sun, the broken air conditioner in her car, her daughter's voice saying, "Mommy, don't be long." She had gone inside the diner to pick up her paycheck, hoping to buy her little girl a small birthday cake later that night. She was gone for only 15 minutes that destroyed her entire life. When she came back, the glass was fogged and her child wasn't breathing. She had screamed until her voice broke. The neighbors called the police, but it was too late. The papers called her a negligent mother. Her husband disappeared. Her family disowned her. And the courts, though they never jailed her, condemned her in every other way. That was the day Amara died, and the woman named Amara Jones was born. When Ethan came to her room that morning, she tried to smile, but her tears betrayed her. "Why sad?" he asked, his small voice trembling. "You don't like me now?" She shook her head and pulled him close. "I love you more than you'll ever know, baby. But I might have to go away for a while." Ethan's eyes filled with panic. "No, no, go." He clung to her tightly, his arms trembling. She closed her eyes, holding him as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes," she whispered, "but that doesn't mean they stop loving." Robert appeared at the door, his face pale. "Ethan," he said, gently, "go to Mrs. Helen for a bit. I need to talk to Amara." The boy shook his head violently. "No, Amara, stay." His voice cracked, full of fear. "Please, Daddy, don't make her go." Robert froze. It was the first time his son had ever called him Daddy. The words struck him like lightning. He knelt down and hugged his son. I promise, no one's taking her away right now. Go with Mrs. Helen, okay? Ethan finally nodded, sniffling, and was led away. When they were alone, Robert turned to Amara. I've spent the whole night thinking, he began quietly. I read every detail of that report, but it doesn't tell the whole story. There are things missing, time gaps, no witness statements. It feels off. Amara shook her head. There's nothing to find, sir. It happened exactly how it's written. I made a mistake, and I'll carry that guilt forever. But what if it wasn't just a mistake? He pressed. What if someone wanted it to look like one? Her eyes widened. What are you saying? He leaned forward. The report mentioned a witness, a man named Raymond Hall. He disappeared before trial. No one followed up. Why? Amara's breath caught. She hadn't known about that. She had been too broken to care back then. I don't know, she whispered. I'm going to find out, Robert said firmly. You saved my son. Now, let me help you. Before she could respond, Victoria entered the room, her face tight, with anger. What is going on here? You can't possibly be considering keeping her here after what she's done. Robert stood tall. This is my house, Victoria. I'll decide who stays in it. You're blinded, Robert, she shouted. Blinded by pity, or maybe by something else. This woman's a danger. Do you want the media to find out? You'll be ruined. Amara stepped forward, her voice calm but broken. Miss Victoria, you don't have to worry. I'll leave today. No. Ethan's voice echoed from the hallway. He had overheard everything. He ran to Amara, clutching her waist. Don't go, please. Victoria's tone softened only slightly. Sweetheart, this isn't about you. It's about keeping you safe. Ethan shook his head violently. She is safe. She makes me happy. I hate you. The room fell silent. Robert's face hardened. That's enough, Victoria. You've done enough damage. Amara knelt and took Ethan's face in her hands. Listen to me, baby, she said softly. Sometimes people need to leave to make things right. I'll always be with you, okay? Here. She touched his chest over his heart. You keep me here. Ethan sobbed uncontrollably, burying his face in her shoulder. Robert felt his chest ache, torn between his duty as a father and the desperate truth that his son needed this woman more than anyone else. That evening, Amara packed her small suitcase. The house felt colder again, like the warmth had been sucked out of its walls. Robert watched her from the stairs, his jaw clenched. I don't want you to go, he said, quietly. If I stay, I'll destroy everything, she replied, her voice trembling. Your reputation, your family, your peace. I don't care about reputation, he said firmly. I care about my son. And maybe his voice faltered. Maybe I care about you too. She froze, unable to speak. Tears filled her eyes. You shouldn't, she whispered. Men like you don't fall for women like me. He took a step closer. Then maybe I'm not like other men. Before she could reply, headlights flashed outside. 2 black cars pulled into the driveway. Robert frowned. Who's that? Victoria stepped into the hallway, guilt flashing in her eyes. I called them, she admitted. Social services. They have the right to investigate. You can't hide her forever. Amara's blood ran cold. She turned toward Robert, her face pale. They'll take me away, she whispered. They'll never let me near Ethan again. Robert's fists clenched. Over my dead body, he said. The front door burst open, and 2 officers stepped inside, holding documents. We have an order to detain Miss Amara Jones for questioning regarding an unresolved case in Georgia. Ethan screamed from the top of the stairs. No, don't take her. He tried to run down, but Robert caught him just in time. Amara looked back one last time, her eyes locking with Robert's. Promise me, she whispered. You'll take care of him. I will, he said, his voice breaking, and I'll bring you back. As they led her away, rain began to fall, heavy, relentless, as if the heavens themselves were mourning. Ethan's cries echoed through the mansion like a haunting song. Robert stood in the doorway, drenched and trembling, watching the car disappear into the storm. Deep down, he knew one thing for certain: this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the fight for truth, redemption, and love that the world had denied her for too long. The mansion had never been so quiet. The laughter, the light, the warmth that Amara brought were gone, replaced by silence so deep it hurt to breathe. The staff spoke in whispers again, afraid to mention her name. The only sound that broke the stillness came from Ethan's room, the soft cries of a child who couldn't understand why the person he loved most had disappeared. Every night, he would call out for her, clutching the little stuffed bear she had mended for him, whispering, "Amara, please come back." Robert would sit beside his bed, holding him, but nothing could stop the tears. Robert's world had shattered too. He had faced business scandals, financial storms, public scrutiny, but nothing had ever hurt like this. The sight of his son breaking down over the loss of one woman had stripped away everything he thought mattered. The money, the mansion, the empire, none of it meant anything anymore. He had made a promise to Amara before they took her, and he intended to keep it. He would find the truth. Early the next morning, he called his private investigator, a man named Daniel Reeves. "I want every detail about that case in Georgia," Robert said, his voice firm but trembling. "Find the witness. Find what the police missed. And Daniel, I don't care how much it costs." Within hours, the investigation began. Daniel flew to Atlanta while Robert dug through old files, court transcripts, and newspaper archives. The deeper he went, the more he realized something didn't add up. The police report claimed Amara had left her daughter in the car for over 2 hours, but the timestamps from her workplace showed she had clocked out only 23 minutes before the ambulance arrived. Someone had changed the timeline. But why? Meanwhile, in a small gray cell hundreds of miles away, Amara sat on a metal bench, her hands trembling. The officers had treated her like a criminal, their voices sharp and cold. They didn't care about her tears or her explanations. They only saw the headlines, "Negligent Mother Escapes Justice, Finally Found." She stared at the floor, her mind filled with memories of Ethan. She could still hear his laughter, still feel his tiny hands clutching hers. That memory was her lifeline. A woman guard, kinder than the rest, approached quietly. "Someone posted your bail," she said. Amara's head shot up. "What?" The guard nodded. "A lawyer from New York. Said his client insisted on it." When she stepped outside, the sun blinded her eyes. A black car waited near the gate, and from it stepped Robert, his face tired but determined. She froze, tears already forming. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They'll destroy you for helping me." He shook his head. "Let them try. You saved my son's life, Amara. Now it's my turn to save yours." They sat in the car in silence as the driver pulled away. After a long moment, she asked, "Why are you doing this for me?" "Because I know you," he said softly. "I've seen who you are. You couldn't hurt a soul. And I think someone made sure you'd carry a guilt that wasn't yours." Her voice broke. "You don't understand. I was there, Robert. I left her in that car. I did it." He looked at her, his eyes steady. "Maybe, but the reports say the car door was unlocked, Amara. Did you ever lock it?" She frowned. "No, I never did. The latch was broken." "Then how was it found locked from the outside when the police arrived?" Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone might have been there. Someone who wanted you to take the blame." The next few days were a blur of digging, calling, and chasing leads. Daniel found the missing witness, Raymond Hall, living in Alabama under a different name. When Robert met him, the man was nervous, his hand shaking. "I remember that day," Raymond said. "I was working near the diner. I saw someone by her car, a man in a gray hoodie. I thought he was her husband. When the news broke later, I tried to tell the police, but I started getting threats. They told me to shut up or I'd end up like her kid." "Who told you that?" Robert pressed. Raymond hesitated. "A man named Keith Coleman." Amara's blood ran cold. "That was my husband," she whispered. "He blamed me for everything, but he was the one drinking that day. He never forgave me when our marriage fell apart." Robert's jaw tightened. "Then it's time the world knows the truth." He hired a legal team and arranged a press conference. Reporters swarmed the gates of the Hensley estate when the story broke. The billionaire defending a woman accused of killing her child became the headline of every network. The public divided instantly, some calling him reckless, others calling it redemption. But Robert didn't care. He stood beside Amara, holding her hand as the cameras flashed. "I believe in her," he said firmly to the crowd. "I believe in truth, and I will not let another innocent person be destroyed by lies." Inside the courtroom, tension filled every seat. The prosecutor tried to paint Amara as irresponsible, but Robert's lawyer presented the new evidence. Raymond's testimony, the security footage from a nearby store that showed a man matching Keith's description near the car that day, and forensic proof that the door had been locked from the outside. When the final witness spoke, silence fell. The truth was clear. Amara had not killed her child. She had been framed by the very man who should have protected her. When the verdict came not guilty, the courtroom erupted. Amara collapsed into tears, her hands trembling as Robert caught her in his arms. She sobbed against his chest. "She's gone, Robert. My baby's gone. Even if they forgive me, I'll never forgive myself." He held her tightly. "You don't have to forget her," he whispered. "But maybe it's time to stop punishing yourself."